I've recorded several videos where I talk about different tribes and different topics that I often find myself talking about tribe. And I've seen several comments that have been made below those videos, and those comments point out that the use of the word tribe is problematic. And in particular, those who write these comments are telling me that this word is generally used to talk about people who are, we can say, who are not originally from Europe. So we can say black people or people of color, as other people prefer calling them. Yeah, I see the legitimate concerns about the use of the word. I understand that the word could be used with the connotation of meaning that inferior in terms of development or evolution, we can even say. I understand those concerns. But I have my own arguments as to why I still think the word is a word that should be used, and groups of people can still be called tribes. And I'm going to talk about that in this video. But the first thing I need to talk about is that there is a myth that only black people are called tribes, or people who are not white are the only ones who are called tribe. I can say that this opposition to the use of the word tribe comes from that I'm calling it a myth, and I'm going to explain how it is a myth. When you read history widely and carefully, you come to see the use of the word to describe people who are not black. In fact, to describe groups of people who are white. I'm going to give you examples of two books I've read very recently where people who are white are described as tribes. And one of those books is Histories by Herodotus. Now, Herodotus is an ancient historian. He lived about 2,500 years ago, and he wrote a book that often is used today as almost the only document that we can rely on to understand the life in, we can say, 2,500 years ago, and even more than that, because when he was writing the book, it seemed like he did a lot of research to understand history up to that point, and then he narrates those things, and then he talks about what was going on at the time when he was alive. Now, in histories, there are so many places where the word is used. But let me clarify this. Of course, histories was not written in English, and tribe is an English word, so we have to remember that. Now, but histories has been translated into English not long ago, probably maybe 200-300 years ago. That's when it was translated into English. Now, the people who translated the book into English most likely were white. I can bet they were white, mostly maybe British. And they chose to use that word to describe groups of people who lived in Europe, groups of people that Herodotus talks about. And I'm guessing they must have run into the word that is an equivalent in Greek, because I think the book was written in Greek and they translated into tribe. And that word appears so many places in the book. Of course, there are areas in the book where that word is used to talk about people in Africa. And okay, but then there are many other places in the book where the word is used to talk about people who lived in Europe. If you check my very old videos when I talk about things that I get from the books that I read, ancient books or ancient texts, you'll see me talking about tribes even when I'm talking about peoples or populations in Europe. Now, the second book that I've read that talks about white people as tribes is From the Founding of Rome by Titus Livius, or Livy. Now, this is a voluminous collection of books that talk about the evolution of Rome from its beginning in the maybe 750s BCE up until when Augustus was emperor. Now, in this book, Livy talks about a lot of things, of course, mostly about the history of Rome, but also the relationship between Rome and other people around them, especially in the Italian peninsula. Now, in that book, which was also translated into English, because I read the copy in English, and I can bet the people who translated that book were white people, the word tribe is used so often. The word tribe is used so often to describe the different groups that lived in the Italian peninsula. But even more importantly, there is one section of the collection where the book talks about the going into Europe of Hannibal. Now, Hannibal was a general from Carthage, and Hannibal went to Europe and did a lot of damage. He was attempting to conquer Rome, because Rome at this point was like the biggest enemy of of Carthage. Now he goes to Europe through Spain, what we know today as Spain, and he goes behind the Alps, and then he climbs the Alps, and of course comes down into the Italian peninsula. Now, Livy gives us very detailed description of this journey that Hannibal took, and something that he talks about a lot while giving us this story is the different tribes that Hannibal met on the way, and sometimes he was trying to solve disputes between different tribes. And we are talking the other side of the Alps, which is, we could say, they were more of Gaulish tribes, we can say French tribes. And the word is used, the translators use the word tribe to describe the different groups of people that lived on that land. And in fact, Livy talks about different other groups who came from other places and maybe farther to the north. And he talks of them as tribes, or not, maybe actually not him, but the word he uses, those who translated the book decided that the more fitting translation will be tribe. Going by this a little bit ancient text, um, it becomes clear that the word tribe isn't necessarily used because people are black. So that's why I said it's a myth of that the word tribe is used just to describe black people. I think that's a myth, if you ask me. But then why is it that today the word is not that often used to describe people who are in Europe, or maybe people who are in the North America? I have my own theory. Maybe some people, you can write in the comment section to tell me whether you think my theory holds. Now, the theory is that when you look at what a tribe is, and I'm going to try to explain what a tribe is basically a group of people who have the same origin, meaning ancestor, and they have the same language, and they have the same culture and way of life, and they live in the same geographical location. Then I think that qualifies a group as a tribe. If they don't share an ancestor, or if they are a collection of different people from different ancestry, then I don't think they qualify to be a tribe. Or even if they share originality or ancestry, but then they no longer use the same language, they no longer live the same culture and custom, then I don't think they are a tribe. Now, when you go to Europe today, most Europe has, for maybe the last 1,000 years, or maybe a little bit more since the Roman Empire, the people have really been mixed up, such that there is so much mixing that using the word tribe becomes like, it doesn't really make sense. And that is even worse when you go to North America, where the US, for example, is a mix of people from so different backgrounds. So it's so hard for you to start looking at tribes. But when you talk, of course, of the people who the white Americans found on the land, that is the Indians, then you can talk of tribes, because those different groups share ancestry, and they share culture and language and things like that, and then they become a tribe. Yeah, so that's my theory, and I've said I'm open to people disagreeing with me, and you can leave your comments about that and tell me where I'm wrong about that theory. There could be people out there, probably not black people, or maybe could be white people, who use the word, and in their head they mean that when the word is used, tribe, it means inferior and less refined as a society. There are those, but I don't think that will be the majority. I think it's the minority, and most people just use it because it's a word that you use. And yes, again, I'll give this, that there many people use the word because it's just a word that is used, and they don't do it with malicious intent, but they use it in a way that they just find themselves describing this as tribe. They don't even think like, why are these tribes and why are these people not tribes? But anyways, bottom line, I don't think there's any problem with the word tribe. Those are my random thoughts.